Today on American Strangeness, we investigate sky serpents, slithery apparitions that appeared over the 19th century midwestern and southern United States, as well as other flying snakes throughout history. 19th century American newspapers existed in a nexus where harsh reality often sideswiped the bizarre and fantastic. Consider, for example, the July 7, 1873 edition of the New York Times. Right on the front page, one could find the latest news on the surrender of Apache and Modoc warriors to the U.S. Army and the fallout from the Union Pacific Railroad bribing members of U.S. Congress, alongside reports of a deadly lightning strike under a clear sky and broad daylight in Troy, New York, and a huge sky serpent seen hovering over Fort Scott, Kansas. Several newspapers during the summer of 1873 would report this strange story from Kansas in conjunction with an earlier and similar sky serpent appearance in Bonham, Texas. The first report of this anomaly, published in the June 14, 1873 North Texas Enterprise of Bonham, reads as follows. Singular phenomenon. A few days ago, a Mr. Hardin, residing some 5 or 6 miles east of this place, saw something resembling an enormous serpent floating in a cloud that was passing over his farm. Several parties of men and boys at work in the fields observed the same thing and were seriously frightened. It seemed to be as large and as long as a telegraph pole, was of a yellow-striped color, and seemed to float along without any effort. They could see it coil itself up, turn over, and thrust forward its huge head as if striking at something, displaying the maneuvers of a genuine snake. The cloud and serpent moved in an easterly direction and were seen by persons a few miles this side of Honey Grove. The question is, what is it and where did it come from? On June 27th, the Monitor of Fort Scott broke the news about a follow-up sighting in its local skies. Singular phenomenon, the sun encircled by a serpent. A strange and remarkable phenomenon was observed at sunrise yesterday morning. The sky was clear, and the sun rose entirely unobscured. When the disk of the sun was about halfway above the horizon, the form of a huge serpent, apparently perfect in form, was plainly seen encircling it, and was visible for some moments. We have this statement from 2 reliable parties who witnessed the phenomenon, and are willing, if necessary, to make affidavit of their assertions. We have too great respect for the sun to rise before it, and therefore are innocent of the authorship of this sea serpent of the sun. But we have all confidence in the credibility of our witnesses. What fearful portent is indicated in this wonderful and ominous phenomenon? We shall join a Sunday school and await the solution. Unsurprisingly, these accounts were met with wry skepticism. The New York Times and other newspapers closed the story of the Fort Scott snake with, "It will soon be time for a national prohibitory liquor law if this sort of thing is to continue." So that's what led to prohibition. Similarly, the South Branch Intelligencer of Romney, West Virginia joked, "Arkansas needs a prohibitory liquor law." They meant Kansas. The Newport Daily News in Rhode Island observed, "A Kansas editor has seen a snake in the sky. The varmints don't often get higher than the boots." While we're wearing our skeptical hat, it should be noted that just 3 days before the Monitor published its story of the sky serpent over Fort Scott, it had printed the similar story of the apparition seen floating over Bonham, Texas. Did that article inspire a writer from the Monitor to fabricate their own sensational snake story, as was not uncommon in that era? Did it fuel the imagination of the Fort Scott public? Or did the sky serpent float more than 300 miles northeast over a couple of weeks to account for both sightings? Of course, these are not the only accounts of flying serpents. Zoologist and cryptozoologist Dr. Carl Schuker collected many of these tales spanning several continents and centuries. Greek historian Herodotus wrote in the 5th century BC of winged snakes from Arabia that plagued Egypt. Winged snakes were reported in West London in the late 1700s, Wales in the 1800s, and there is a long-standing tradition of them in the southern Alps, wrote Schuker. Outside of Europe, there are several witnesses who attest to the Namibian flying snake, a brown or yellow and spotted serpent with a horned head that soars over the Namib Desert in southern Africa, descending from rocky ledges via two bat-like wings along its neck or mouth. The Telaish natai, or Arizona flying snake, and I'm sure I just butchered that pronunciation, is described by the Navajo and Hopi, as a dull gray serpent with sparkling wing-like membranes that can retract into its body and create a hissing sound as the animal flies. Such creatures have also been reported along the Rio Grande in Texas and Mexico. There is a scientifically proven flying snake, the Chrysopolia ornata of Southeast Asia, which glides through the air by launching from a tree while spreading its ribs and flattening its body to transform itself into a ribbon-shaped parachute, according to Schuker. Further tales of flying serpents appear throughout history. Here is an intriguing sampling. A Somali legend tells of a flying snake that hoarded precious stones, attended by 100 reptilian guards. Once, a horseman carried away a jewel from this bounty and was pursued by the reptile army. Although the horseman escaped back to his tribe, the snake's warriors would not let up until the jewel was returned. Anyone getting She-Ra vibes? In 1741, British Commodore George Anson anchored off the Panamanian island of Kibo, now called Coiba, during his circumnavigation of the globe. There, Spaniards informed Anson's crew that there was often found in the woods a most mischievous serpent called the flying snake, which they said darted itself from the boughs of trees on either man or beast that came within its reach, and whose sting they believed to be inevitable death. James Churchward, proponent of the lost continent of Mu, claimed that Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god of the Aztecs, was a real but rare animal residing in the swampy, deep, unexplored forests of Yucatan and Guatemala. Churchward described this creature as the most venomous ever recorded, killing its victims within 2 minutes. Its head was broad, flat, and V-shaped like most venomous serpents. He described Quetzalcoatl as having a body the size of a duck and a 5-foot-long neck covered in short, hair-like feathers. The body and neck were off-white, thickly mottled with gray. There was a tuft of short feathers in place of a tail. Its wings had long upper feathers that drooped like those of a bird of paradise and had a prismatic sheen. Churchward wrote that the serpent was clumsy in flight, able to stay aloft for only a few yards at a time. In its September 17, 1833 edition, the Bengal Hukuru newspaper of Calcutta reported alarming intelligence from the neighborhood of Fars. It's unclear if this story was referring to a town in India or the province of Fars in Persia. A dragon-like fiery flying serpent had commandeered the main road through town, spraying deadly venom on anyone who dared pass and devouring their corpses. A posse of 40 men set out to battle the beast, but only 2 maintained confidence in their incantations and ventured forward. One man was immediately smote by a pestilential blast from the serpent, which pounced upon the remains and began devouring them. Witnessing the fate of his comrade, the other man made a hasty retreat and informed the remainder of the valiant band of 40 and fellow villagers of the failed expedition. As one paper of the day declared, a likely cock and bull story. Similar to the Kansas and Texas tales of 1873, a flying snake was spotted over Hartsville, South Carolina in the summer of 1897. A local newspaper reported the flying snake was seen near Newman Swamp by Mr. Odom on Sunday afternoon, say at 6 o'clock. This is about 10 miles south of this place. Later, say at 7 o'clock on the same day, it was seen by Mr. Henry Polson in Chesterfield County, 12 miles north of here. Mr. Polson says, the monster was low down, just above the treetops, had its head thrown back in position to strike, and was just floating through the atmosphere lengthwise. He says it seemed to be 25 to 40 feet long and about 8 to 10 inches through at the largest part. In the language of Mr. Polson, he do not say it was a snake, but he do say it was the most like a snake of anything he ever saw, and he believes it was a snake. One contemporary suggestion was that the snake had actually been a flock of pelicans. The Sky Serpent went down to Georgia around Halloween 1903, with several witnesses in the Osceola area watching what looked like a snake over a yard in length, flying about 20 feet in the air over the still branch, and they are badly wrought up over the strange sight. The reptile, they say, made a hissing noise as it flew. It's unsettling to ponder the massive sky serpents of 1873, especially if there is any truth to their surreal and apparition-like appearance over America. Compared to the diversity of airborne ophidians recalled throughout history, these wingless, gravity-defying serpents seem more like an omen less than a decade removed from the dark days of the U.S. Civil War. They might, however, just have been a news editor's flight of fancy, a sensational yarn to sell papers. If so, it continues the legacy of flying snakes as a perpetual manifestation of human imagination and storytelling.